Hide and seek is supposed to be a game, fun, harmless, innocent. But for these people, it became something else entirely. Behind basements, inside closets, deep in the woods, something was waiting. These are 10 allegedly true hide-and-seek horror stories, where what was hiding didn't want to be found, and what was seeking wasn't human. Welcome to the channel, where we share the creepiest real horror stories from those who lived through the unexplainable. If you enjoy true accounts of terror, hit subscribe, and whatever you do, don't look behind you. When I was a kid, weekends sometimes meant a trip to my aunt and uncle's countryside home. They had 2 boys around my age, so I was always pumped to visit. Their place sat on a wide stretch of land, a small farm with fields, old sheds, and lots of freedom for us to run wild. It was the kind of place where the grown-ups trusted you to roam as long as you showed up at dinner. But the real adventure wasn't on their property. About half a mile away was this forgotten, long-abandoned farm. No one had lived there in decades. It had crumbling barns, weather-beaten houses, and broken-down silos. Basically a treasure map of danger and mystery for 3 curious boys. We weren't supposed to go there, obviously, but we'd sneak off now and then, our imaginations running as wild as we did. I didn't think much of it at first, just another playground. But that changed when my cousins started telling me stories about what had supposedly happened in the main house. According to them, years ago a man had gone insane, murdered his entire family inside those very walls, and then hanged himself. They claimed his angry spirit still haunted the place, looking for new victims. The usual ghost story fare. Even at that age, I knew it was probably just them trying to scare me. Still, there was something about the place that made those tales feel possible. The kind of fear that grows legs when paired with creaking wood and wind-whipped shutters. One afternoon, we decided to play hide and seek. I was the last round, so now it was my turn to hide. As my cousins started counting, I bolted for the rickety brown barn on the edge of the abandoned property. The thing had a small upstairs section that used to be living quarters, and it looked just remote enough to guarantee no one would check it. I climbed the creaking stairs, careful not to fall through. Inside, it was like a ghost of someone's life frozen in time. Furniture still sat where it was left. Clothes lay scattered on the floor. Dishes were shattered across the linoleum like some final fight had ended in chaos. I picked my way across the mess until I found a small bedroom. It had a closet, perfect. Jackpot. Long black dresses still hung from the rod, stiff with dust. I slipped in behind them and pulled the folding door shut as gently as I could. A sliver of sunlight from a cracked window spilled through the space between the doors, giving me just enough light to see my knees tucked up to my chest. And then, I waited. Time passed. A lot of time. It got boring, as it always did. But this time, no one came looking. I debated whether to just come out and yell, "You got me!" But something held me back. I didn't want to be the first one to give up. At some point, my eyelids grew heavy. I must have nodded off. I woke up with a start. Pitch black. For a few terrifying seconds, I had no idea where I was. Then it all came back. The game, the closet, the house. But now it was night, completely dark. And I was alone in a decaying building that, even in daylight, felt haunted. The pit of my stomach sank like a stone. I tried to stand, but my leg cramped hard, pins and needles locking me in place. That's when I heard it. A loud bang from downstairs, a door slamming shut. I froze. Was that my cousins? Had they finally come looking? Silence. Then came the footsteps. Not running, not casual. These steps were slow, heavy, deliberate. Each one landed with a low thud, followed by something else. A dragging noise. A rhythmic scrape across the floorboards after every other step. Whatever it was climbing the stairs. I held my breath. These weren't the footsteps of a kid. This was someone or something bigger, stronger, more determined. The steps reached the top. I could hear the floor creaking beneath the weight. The dragging sound continued, slow and steady, punctuated by long pauses as if the thing was listening between movements. Then it entered the room I was in. I could hear the crunch of broken glass underfoot, the soft whisper of fabric being brushed aside. It was close now, very close. I thought I could smell something. Faint at first, then stronger, a mix of mildew and something worse. Something rotting. The steps came closer until they stopped. Right in front of the closet. I squeezed my eyes shut. Silence. Then nothing. No movement. No breathing. No creaking floorboards. Eventually, the footsteps resumed, retreating across the room, then down the hall. I don't know how long I sat there, frozen, barely breathing. Minutes? An hour? My limbs were stiff, my mind a mess. I finally began to build up the nerve to crack open the door and make a run for it. That's when it happened. All at once, three things hit me like a wave of pure nightmare. First, the smell. Intense and nauseating, like fresh roadkill baking in the sun. Second, I heard breathing. Raspy, shallow breaths right behind me. Third, I felt it. Hot, damp breath against the back of my neck. I exploded out of that closet without even thinking, stumbling over the mess in the room, crashing into walls, furniture, door frames. Whatever was in my way. I don't remember screaming, but I know I was. I could hear something behind me. Those same footsteps, now faster, heavier. They were chasing me. I never looked back. Not once. I barreled through the dark hallway, down the stairs, past the splintered banister, through the warped front door and into the night. The moment I hit the cool air outside, the footsteps stopped. The night was dead quiet. I turned around. No one. No movement. No sounds. Nothing followed me. Still, I didn't stop running until I was back on familiar land. When I finally reached my aunt and uncle's house, the first thing I saw was a police cruiser in the driveway. My parents were there, frantic. Everyone rushed me, demanding to know where I'd been. Apparently, my cousins had given up looking when it got dark and ran home, terrified. When I didn't show up by nightfall, they told their parents, who called the police. Search teams had combed every building, including the one I'd been in. That's when it got really weird. According to the police, they checked every structure, every room, every closet. They found nothing. They didn't find me. It didn't make sense. I hadn't moved. I never left the closet until I ran out screaming. But somehow I wasn't seen. Or maybe I wasn't supposed to be seen. Years later, one of my cousins finally told me the rest. He and his brother had looked everywhere, just like they said. But there was one detail they kept from the adults. While searching, they glanced up at the window of the very room I had hidden in. And they saw me. Only, it wasn't me. There was a boy in the window. Same height, same build, smiling, and waving them in. He motioned for them to come upstairs. That's when they ran. Because the boy in the window, he wasn't me. I was asleep in the closet the whole time. A few months back, I was hanging out at my friend Dan's place. Same as I did most Fridays. He lives just a few houses down the block from me, and most of our group is in that same stretch. I'm 16 now, second oldest in the crew. There's Alan, who's 17. Dan's my age, just a little younger. Then there's Johnny and Danielle, both 14. Nick's 13, and Tom's the youngest at 12. Big age range, I know, but we were the only real group of kids in the whole neighborhood. We didn't live in a typical cookie-cutter suburb. Our neighborhood was more rural, more space, fewer houses. That made things feel a little lonelier during the day, but come nighttime, it turned into the perfect playground. Our tradition, manhunt, every Friday night, no fail. Danielle and Nick's place had a great yard with lots of shadows and hiding spots, so that was our usual battleground. The rules were simple. One team hides, the other seeks, And the ultimate goal is to make it back to Nick's front porch without getting caught. Home base. That's where all the glory lived. This one particular night, it was my team's turn to hide. I had 3 other kids with me, Dan being the most important. He and I were tight. We stuck together and always picked the wildest hiding spots. That night, we had a brilliant idea. We were going to use Mr. Nelson's house. Mr. Nelson had passed away a few years back. Since then, his house sat untouched, vacant, and quietly falling apart. No one had bought it. No one visited. It just sat there like an old memory collecting dust and vines. To us, it was a perfect place to disappear during manhunt. We didn't even think twice. Me and Dan slipped into the backyard and crouched down near the edge of the property, right next to the lake. A dense patch of bushes gave us just enough cover. But then Dan got this look in his eye, you know, the one that, I'm about to do something stupid but awesome look. Before I could stop him, he whispered, I'm going inside. I watched as he slid open a ground floor window that had clearly been left unlocked for years and slipped inside like he'd done it 100 times before. So there I was, alone in the bushes, crouching and waiting. About 5 minutes passed. Then I saw movement. 2 kids from the other team were creeping into the backyard. They were noisy, snapping twigs, whispering way too loud, stepping on every branch in existence. I stayed dead still. They were only a few feet away at one point, but eventually, they wandered off toward the street. Opportunity. I scanned the windows, hoping Dan would spot me and we could bolt together. That's when I saw him, upstairs, in the second-floor window. His face was barely lit from behind, but I could make out his features. It was Dan. Same hoodie, same shaggy hair, looking straight down at me. I waved at him, whispering, "Let's go." He didn't move. I thought maybe he couldn't see me, so I ducked out of the bushes, went to the window Dan had used earlier, opened it and climbed in. The house was unsettling, quiet in a way that felt unnatural. Dust coated everything. The air was heavy and stale, like it hadn't been breathed in years. I stood in the living room and called out softly, "Dan!" And that's when I heard his voice, just a few feet behind me. "Dude, shoo!" I jumped. Dan was right there, not upstairs, sitting behind the old couch in the shadows. I blinked at him. "How the hell did you get down here so fast?" He looked confused. "What are you talking about? I've been here the whole time." I started to answer, but we both froze. Above us, the ceiling creaked. Not once. Not random. Footsteps. Distinct. Measured. Heavy. They moved from one end of the second floor to the other, slow and steady, like someone walking with purpose. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Dan was already crawling back toward the window. I was right behind him. We tumbled out and sprinted back to Nick's house like hell was chasing us. That night, we called the game off. When Dan told his dad about what happened, I could tell the man wasn't sure if he believed us. But he agreed to come with us to check it out. Maybe to ease our minds. Or maybe because deep down he was just as curious. Dan's dad had been friends with Mr. Nelson back in the day, so he knew the house well. He led the way, flashlight in hand. We climbed in the same window. The inside was exactly as we'd left it. Then he took us upstairs. When we reached the bathroom, the one with the window where I'd seen Dan's face, he flicked on the light. Empty. Nothing but a reddish-brown crumpled blanket on the floor in the corner. No footprints. No sign of anyone. We checked the whole house, room by room. Nothing. Dan's dad stood silent in the doorway for a moment, then turned to us and said, "If either of you or any of your friends see anyone in this house again, you come get me. Immediately. We'll call the police." He was dead serious, and that scared me more than anything else. It's been a few months since that night. We haven't seen anything. Haven't been back inside. But sometimes, when I walk by that house on the way to school, I glance up at that second-floor window. And I swear, some days I still feel eyes looking down at me, like someone, or something, is waiting for me to come back. You ever get that uneasy feeling in the woods? Like the trees are watching? That the silence is just a little too silent? Yeah. I didn't believe in that stuff either. Not until the summer of 2017, when I worked as a camp counselor up in the Adirondacks. It was supposed to be a chill gig, sunlight, canoeing, s'mores. You know, summer stuff. I was 19, fresh out of my freshman year at college and desperate to get away from my parents' house for a few months. The camp was called Cedar Hollow. Sounded cozy, right? In reality, it was about as remote as you could get. No Wi-Fi, no cell signal, just miles of dense pine forest and a murky lake that looked like it hadn't seen a fish in years. But it paid decent and they provided room and board. I figured, what the hell? There were 10 of us counselors all around the same age. The campers arrived in early July, kids between 8 and 14, split into age groups, each with their own bunkhouse. I was assigned the oldest boys, 11 to 14, aka the wannabe tough guys. My co-counselor was Josh, a laid-back dude who wore hemp necklaces and knew way too much about mushrooms. The first few days were fine. Mosquitoes were awful, but the kids were mostly well-behaved, and the staff got along. Then came Thursday, the night we heard the whispering. We were sitting around the fire pit near the lake, just me, Josh, and the boys. They were swapping scary stories, trying to one-up each other with tales of escaped convicts and monster sightings. Typical campfire fare. That's when one of the quieter kids, Caleb, piped up with something different. He said, "My brother told me this camp used to be a hospital for sick kids." The group went quiet. Josh laughed. "What, like a summer hospital?" Caleb shook his head. "No, like a real one. For crazy kids. A long time ago, they shut it down after a kid went missing. They never found him." A couple of the younger boys looked uncomfortable. One kid, Marcus, tried to laugh it off, but it came out nervous. Then Caleb added, "They say if you walk around the woods late at night, you can hear him whispering to you, trying to get you to come find him." At that moment, a sharp crack echoed from the woods behind us. Everyone froze. Josh stood up fast, shining his flashlight toward the trees. "Probably a raccoon," he muttered, "or a squirrel dropping a branch." We packed up soon after and went back to the cabins. That night I couldn't sleep. It wasn't the story, it was the sound. That crack in the woods. It wasn't random. It was timed. Like someone or something had waited for the perfect moment. Around 2 a.m., I gave up trying to sleep and walked outside to clear my head. The camp was dead silent. No wind. No crickets. Just stillness. Then I heard it. A whisper. Soft. Right behind me. I spun around. Nothing but the outline of trees against the faint glow of the moon. I stood there, heart pounding. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I was tired. I turned to go back inside. And that's when I heard it again. Closer this time. It wasn't just whispering, it was my name. Ryan. Low. Dry. Like dead leaves brushing against your ear. I bolted inside, locked the door, and didn't sleep a second that night. The next day, I kept it to myself. What was I supposed to say? "Hey, I heard my name whispered in the woods," like some horror cliché? No way. But Caleb wasn't himself that morning. He was pale and quiet, like he hadn't slept either. Later that day, during arts and crafts, he came up to me and asked, "Did you hear him too?" I just stared at him. He said, "I heard him last night. He said your name, then mine." I wanted to dismiss it, rationalize, but the kid was scared. This wasn't a prank. That evening, I told Josh. He laughed at first, then saw I wasn't joking. "I mean, this is a camp in the woods, man. Everything whispers out here," he said. Still, he agreed to keep an ear out. That night, we did cabin checks around 10 p.m. I made sure all the boys were in their bunks. Caleb was asleep, or at least pretending to be. The rest were passed out. I stepped out into the cool night air and walked toward the counselor lodge. That's when I noticed the light in the woods. Faint, flickering, like a lantern. I should have ignored it. Instead, I grabbed a flashlight and followed it. The path wound behind the lake into the older part of the forest. We'd been told not to let campers go that way. Unstable terrain or whatever. But the light bobbed ahead, always just out of reach. Then I saw the outline of a building. Not a cabin. Not anything from the camp. A crumbling concrete structure, half buried by vines and years of moss. A rusted sign above the door read, Administration. I stepped inside. It reeked of mold and something sour. Old gurneys lay tipped over. Cabinets were smashed. Graffiti covered every wall. But what caught my eye was the mural. On one wall, someone had painted dozens of small figures, children, all holding hands, their faces blank. Except one. One figure was painted in vivid red, with a twisted smile and wide, black eyes. Beneath it, scratched into the paint, were the words, "He never left." Suddenly, my flashlight flickered, then died. I stood frozen in the pitch black. Then, whispers, all around me, circling, rising. They weren't in English. They weren't words, just sound. Twisted, broken, angry sound. I ran, slammed into the doorframe, scraped my shoulder, didn't care. I didn't stop until I was back at camp, gasping for breath on the porch of the counselor lodge. When I looked back at the woods, there was no light. No whisper. Just night. I planned to quit the next morning. But when I woke up, we had bigger problems. Caleb was missing. His bunk was untouched. No one had seen him. The other kids didn't know anything. They thought he'd gotten up early for the bathroom. The camp director called the police. By noon, we had search teams in the woods. They swept the entire area. No sign of Caleb. I told them about the building, the whispers, the mural. I expected them to laugh. Instead, the director's face went pale. "We sealed that off years ago," she said quietly. "It was part of the original property, a children's hospital. We were told to leave it alone." I asked her if anyone had gone back there recently. She shook her head. "We don't go into the woods after dark." They never found Caleb. 2 weeks later, the camp shut down early for safety evaluations. The rest of the summer was canceled. I haven't been back since. Sometimes when I can't sleep, I think about that night, about the mural, about the red figure with the smile, and I wonder if Caleb heard the whisper too, if he followed the light, if he's still out there, somewhere, whispering in the trees, waiting for the next name. When you think of horror, most people imagine old houses, dark woods, or things with claws lurking under beds. But sometimes, it's quieter, simpler, like a phone ringing in the middle of the night. It started with a voicemail. Back in 2021, I was living alone in a small apartment on the edge of a college town. Nothing fancy, just a third-floor walk-up with thin walls and no air conditioning. I just graduated and hadn't quite figured out what was next, so I was working nights at a gas station and crashing during the day. One morning, after a long shift, I crawled into bed and passed out around 8 a.m. When I woke up that afternoon, I saw I'd missed a call from an unknown number. No big deal, probably spam, but they'd left a voicemail. I almost deleted it without listening. But something about the message length, 17 seconds, made me pause. Figured, why not? So I hit play. First, it was just static. Then came a voice. A whisper, low and breathy. "Please, help me. I don't know where I am. It's dark. He's coming." Click. I just sat there holding the phone, staring at the screen. Was it a prank? A wrong number? The thing that got me wasn't the words. It was the voice. It didn't sound acted. Sounded real. Desperate. Like someone clinging to their last sliver of hope. I replayed it. Again. And again. Same whisper. Same static. Same fear. I called the number back. A robotic voice said, "This number is not in service." I hung up, unsettled. I tried to shake it off, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. At work that night, it kept looping in my head. "Please, help me. It's dark." The next morning, I was getting ready to sleep when my phone buzzed again. Same number. Voicemail. I didn't even wait this time. I hit play immediately. This time, the voice was clearer. Still whispering. But now shaking. "I'm still here. I think he's in the room. I can't move. Please, help me." Click. I called the number again. Same response. "Not in service." I tried to track the call using some online lookup tool, but it came up blank. Not even a region. Just no info available. I told myself it was some elaborate scam, maybe viral marketing for a horror movie. But deep down, I didn't believe that, because the third message came the next day. And this time, it said my name. "Jack, please. I know you hear me. He's getting closer. I can hear him breathing. You have to help me. Before he..." Click. My skin went cold. I nearly dropped the phone. I never said my name in any of my voicemails. Not even in my outgoing message. I double-checked. Something about hearing it in that broken, terrified whisper. It made everything feel too close. I didn't sleep that day. I stayed up, phone clutched in my hand, waiting for another call. It didn't come. Not until 3 a.m. the next night. Same number. This time, there was no voice. Just heavy, rhythmic breathing. Then a scraping noise, like metal on concrete. Then a whisper. Close, almost inside my ear. "Don't answer the door." Click. I sat in the dark, staring at my apartment door. I live alone. No one was supposed to visit me. Ever. I stood up, heart hammering, and locked the deadbolt. Double-checked the chain. And just as I turned away, someone knocked. 3 soft knocks. I didn't move. Then came a whisper. From the other side. "Jack." I backed away, grabbed my phone, and called 911. My voice was shaking, but I told them someone was at my door and I thought they were trying to break in. Cops showed up 10 minutes later. There was no one at my door. No signs of forced entry. No footprints in the dusty hallway. Just nothing. They took my statement and left. Said to call if anything else happened. That night, I sat on my couch, lights on, watching the door. I must have drifted off around 6 a.m. I woke up to another voicemail. This time, the voice wasn't whispering. It was angry. "You shouldn't have called them. You weren't supposed to call them. Now you've made him angry." Then the sound of screaming. High-pitched. Raw. Cut off by a wet, choking sound. Then silence. Click. I tried to block the number. Didn't work. I changed phones. It still came through. Every night at 3 a.m., a new message. Sometimes it was crying. Sometimes whispers. Sometimes just silence. But I could feel it. Whatever this was, it was getting closer. One night, I played a message and heard what sounded like footsteps. Pacing. Then the voice said, "I'm at your window. I live on the 3rd floor." But I still looked. And for a split second, I swear to God, I saw a shadow duck out of view. I've since moved. I changed my number. Got a new phone. New carrier. Everything. The calls stopped. For a while. Until last week. When I woke up to a new voicemail. From a number that wasn't even numbers. Just symbols. Glitches. Played it. Static. Then the voice. Same as before. But now, calm. Cold. "I never needed your help, Jack. I just needed you to listen. Now you're part of this." Click. I haven't played any more messages. I don't want to know what's next. But every night, my phone buzzes at 3 a.m., and I let it ring, because I know, the moment I answer, it'll be more than just a call. When I was 11, my family moved into a house that everyone in town called the Mirage. It was this strange old Victorian-style home built in the late 1800s, with weird angles, narrow staircases, and more mirrors than you could count. I'm talking mirrors in the hallway, the living room, even one inside the pantry door. But the centerpiece was this massive full-body mirror in the second-floor hallway, just outside my bedroom. It was tall, framed in black wood carved with vines and thorns, and the glass was so clean it looked like you could fall right through. The real estate agent told us it was an original feature, and my mom, who's into antique stuff, fell in love with it. I didn't. From the moment I saw it, it creeped me out, not because of how it looked, but how I looked in it. The reflection was off, just slightly. At first, I thought it was in my head. A trick of the glass, maybe. But over time, I noticed that the me in the mirror blinked just a little slower than I did, smiled a little too long, and sometimes he didn't smile back at all. It started subtle. I'd walk past the mirror and feel like I was being watched. Not from behind, but from inside the mirror. Like my reflection didn't want me to leave. One night, I woke up thirsty and headed to the kitchen. On the way back, I passed the hallway mirror. It was dark. I didn't see much, just my shape in the faint glow from a nightlight. But then my reflection moved. I swear to you, it turned its head to look at me. I froze. The reflection stared and smiled. Not a warm smile, not friendly. It was like it knew something I didn't. Then it raised its hand and waved. I ran back to my room and slammed the door. When I told my parents the next morning, they brushed it off. You were half asleep, honey. Mirrors don't wave. You've got an active imagination. I stopped trying to convince them after that. Things escalated fast. One afternoon, I got home from school and noticed something strange. The hallway mirror looked different, smudged, like someone had pressed their face against it. I leaned in to get a closer look, and I saw handprints. From the inside, 5 long fingers dragging down the glass, as if someone or something was trying to claw their way out. I backed away and slammed my bedroom door shut. That night, I covered the mirror with a blanket, tucked the ends in tight. When I woke up the next morning, the blanket was gone, folded neatly on the floor, like someone had taken it down carefully. And in the mirror, carved faintly into the glass, were words. You can't hide. I started having nightmares. I'd see myself, staring back at me from the mirror, eyes black and mouth open in a silent scream. Or I'd see my reflection reaching out, beckoning me to come closer. Sometimes the dream me would walk out of the mirror, and I'd wake up screaming, cold sweat soaking my sheets. It all came to a head one night in early December. I was brushing my teeth, staring down at the sink, when I looked up into the mirror above it and saw something that froze my blood. My reflection wasn't brushing its teeth. It was standing still, just watching me, not blinking. I backed away, terrified. The reflection leaned forward, slowly, and mouthed the words, "Switch." Then it smiled, and the lights went out. I screamed. My parents rushed in, flipped the lights on. Everything looked normal. The mirror was just a mirror, but I couldn't stop shaking. I begged them to take it down. All of them, every mirror in the house. They said no, said I was scaring myself, said I needed to stop feeding into it. So I took matters into my own hands. That night, I grabbed a hammer from the garage and marched upstairs. I stood in front of the hallway mirror, heart pounding. The reflection was calm, expressionless, waiting. I raised the hammer, and it spoke, out loud. My voice, but not mine. If you break me, you break you. I hesitated. tilted its head, then smirked. I swung anyway. The hammer hit the glass, and the world turned inside out. For a split second, I wasn't in the hallway. I was inside, in the mirror, looking out. I saw myself frozen, hammer in hand. But I couldn't move, couldn't scream. I was trapped. Then, just like that, I snapped back. On the floor, gasping, the mirror intact.
No crack, no scratch.
Like nothing had happened. Except now, I wasn't sure anymore. Was I still me? Or had we actually switched? For days I avoided mirrors. When I finally dared to look, I studied my reflection carefully. It blinked when I blinked, smiled when I smiled. But something was off. A delay, a subtle twitch, a glimmer of amusement behind the eyes that wasn't mine. I told my parents I wanted to go live with Grandma for a while. They didn't argue. I'm 28 now. Haven't set foot in that house since I turned 18. I avoid mirrors as much as possible. When I do look, it's quick, never long enough to stare. Because every once in a while, I see something I shouldn't. A grin that lingers. Fingers tapping on the other side of the glass. A flash of black where my eyes should be. I don't know what that thing was. Or is. But I know it's still there. Watching. Waiting. And one day, it might find someone new to switch with. Someone who won't swing the hammer. My older brother Ben vanished in 2015. No body.
No clues. No explanation.
He was 24. I was 18. And we were on a weekend camping trip with two of his friends, Dylan and Rachel, up near Gray Pines, a thick, secluded patch of forest in the mountains of northern Washington. Ben had always been outdoorsy, and after I graduated high school, he offered to take me on a proper trip. Tents, no phone service, cooking over fire, the whole deal. I wish I'd never gone. The first night was fine. We set up camp by the lake, roasted hot dogs, shared a bottle of whiskey, and passed out under the stars. It was the second night when things started to go wrong. We'd spent the day hiking and returned just before sunset. I was exhausted and crawled into my tent early. I remember drifting off to the soft sound of wind through the pines. Then I woke up suddenly. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. No wind.
No crickets.
No sound at all. I poked my head out of the tent. The campfire was still smoldering. Dylan and Rachel were asleep in their own tents. But Ben was gone. At first, I figured he'd just gone to pee. But minutes passed. Then 20. Then 40. He didn't come back. I walked the perimeter, called his name. No response. Just that eerie silence. By morning, we were in full panic mode. The three of us searched every nearby trail, every corner of the woods. No sign of him. Rachel wanted to call the rangers, but there was no signal. So we packed up and hiked back to the car, a brutal 5-mile trek, and drove to the nearest ranger station. They launched a search team immediately. Dogs, helicopters, volunteers. They found nothing.
No footprints. No torn clothes.
No dropped gear. It was like he'd vanished into thin air. We filed a report. I gave my statement. My parents were devastated. Weeks passed. Then months. The case went cold. But I never forgot the feeling I had that night. The oppressive silence, like the forest had swallowed him whole. Then, 2 years later, I got a message. From Ben. Came in the form of an email. No subject. No body. Just an attachment. A single audio file. Gray Pines MP3. I stared at it for an hour before I opened it. First, there was nothing. Just wind. Static. Then a voice. Ben's voice. He whispered, "Don't come looking for me." Then silence again. Then something else. A voice I didn't recognize. High-pitched. Guttural. Like a child imitating human speech. It said, "He belongs to the Pines now." Then the file cut out. I forwarded the email to the authorities. They traced the IP. Pinged from somewhere in Montana, but the address was a dead end. An abandoned property. I tried calling the ranger station. They said there were rumors, old folklore about the Gray One, who lived deep in the woods and lured people with familiar voices. A local myth. Until Ben. I haven't been back to Gray Pines. I don't plan to, but sometimes, in the middle of the night, my phone buzzes. No number, no message, just a new audio file. And when I listen, there's always the same voice, whispering, calling my name, telling me to come back. And every time I hear it, I feel the forest pulling, like it wants me to. People think cemeteries are dead places, quiet, still. But I've spent the last 15 years working as the night caretaker at Renfield Cemetery, and I can tell you with absolute certainty, they're not even close. Renfield is a small town buried in the Appalachian Hills, with foggy mornings and roads that always seem to be under repair. The cemetery sits on the edge of town, tucked behind a rusted wrought iron gate and flanked by a crumbling stone wall that's more moss than mortar now. When I first took the job, I figured it'd be easy money. Just lock the gates at sunset, do a few perimeter checks, keep out any rowdy teens looking to sneak in with flashlights and beer. But the first night I clocked in, old Harold, the retiring caretaker, gave me one piece of advice that stuck in my gut like a nail. Don't answer if they knock from below. I laughed, thought he was just being creepy, part of some local hazing ritual. He didn't laugh back. The weirdness started within the first week. It began with the bell. There's a small chapel near the back of the cemetery, ancient, wooden, with stained glass windows that rattle in the wind. Atop the chapel is a bell tower. No one's used it in decades. No rope, no clapper. But sometimes around 2 a.m. it rings. 3 times. Always 3. I'd sprint up to check it, but there was never anyone there. The pastor's journal, which I found buried in a drawer inside the chapel, mentioned the bell tolling for the wayward dead. No explanation. Then came the graves. They started opening. Not dug up, not like vandalism. No tools. No signs of disturbance. Just open. Fresh holes. Every time I checked the cemetery in the morning, 1 or 2 graves would be gaping. Headstones toppled. Coffins missing. But there'd be no dirt. No mess. As if something had pulled them from below. Like the ground wanted them back. I'd log it, report it, even filled them in myself more than once. But it kept happening. And it got worse. One night I heard a knock. Not on the door. Not on the gate. From below. I was patrolling the east side of the cemetery, near the older graves. Dates from the 1800s, names long worn away when I heard it. 3 soft knocks. I stopped, listened. Another knock. This time from beneath a stone that read, Eleanor Finch, 1859 to 1883. Then a voice. Muffled. Weak. Please. I'm still here. I backed away. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But I stood frozen, watching the soil quiver, like breath beneath the surface. Then silence. I didn't sleep that morning. By month 2 I started seeing them. Figures in the mist. Pale, drifting between the stones. Never full-bodied. Never detailed. But always watching. And then there was the caretaker's ledger. It was an old book I found tucked under a floorboard in the chapel, filled with names and dates, hundreds of entries all written in different handwriting. Each page marked a death, but some had second dates. Years later, with the word returned, I found Ben Davis, died 1921, returned 1923. Mary Alder, died 1894, returned 1901. What did that mean? Returned from where? I started marking the nights the bell rang. Each time, the next morning, a grave was open, and one of those returned names would be missing from the ledger, as if they'd come back to collect someone, or something. Then came the fog, thicker than usual. rolling in at dusk and never lifting. I could barely see 5 feet ahead with my flashlight. That's when I saw her. A girl, standing between the headstones, barefoot, hair dripping wet. She didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. I called out, asked if she was okay. She lifted her hand and pointed toward me, then whispered, "They're waking up," and vanished. I ran back to the office, locked the door, shut off the lights, and sat in silence until sunrise. The next day, the grave she had stood on was open. Eleanor Finch, the same one I'd heard knock. But this time, there was something inside. Not a body, a hole, tunnel, descending deep into the earth. I couldn't see the bottom, but I could hear whispers rising from the dark. I tried to quit. I packed up, told the town clerk I was done. She nodded slowly and said, "You should have lasted longer than Harold. He made it 2 years." I froze. "Wait, what?" "He left after 2 years. Said the knocking kept him awake. That they were asking for names." "What names?" She just stared at me, then handed me a new envelope. Inside was a list. 6 names. One of them was mine. I've been here 7 years now. I don't sleep much. The bell still rings. The grave's still open. Sometimes I leave out offerings, old toys, jewelry, candles, on the stones with the old estates. I don't know if it helps, but sometimes the knocking skips a night. I still have the ledger. I still hear the whispers. And I still remember Harold's warning. So if you ever visit Renfield Cemetery, and you hear a knock from below, don't answer, because once you answer, they know you're listening, and they never stop calling. I moved into apartment 3B because it was cheap, clean, and close to work. That's it.
No tragic backstory. No strange pool.
Just a desperate 20-something looking for a place that wouldn't drain my savings. It was part of a converted brownstone on the edge of downtown. Quiet neighborhood. Old brick, wooden floors, creaky stairs. Nothing unusual, except for the red door. It was at the end of the 3rd floor hallway, right across from my own unit. Bright, candy apple red, with a shiny brass knob. No number.
No peepole.
Just red. I asked the landlord about it when I first toured the place. He paused. "That room's not in use," he said. "Storage. Don't worry about it." He moved on quickly. I should have known then. The first night I slept there, I heard knocking. Not on my door. On the red one. 3 slow knocks. I peeked through my peephole. The hallway was empty. I cracked my door and leaned out. Still empty. I stood there for a few moments, staring at the red door. Then I heard it. A whisper. Low. Gravelly. From the other side. "Let me in." I shut my door fast and locked it. Tried to laugh it off. Old building. Pipes. Drafts. Maybe someone in another apartment was messing around. But the next night it happened again. This time the whisper came with a scratching sound, like fingernails on wood. I didn't sleep much. By the end of the first week it was every night. Always at 3:03 a.m. Knock, 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 followed by whispering, sometimes crying. Once, I heard a child's voice say, "It's cold out here." But the hallway was always empty. I stopped opening my door. Then one night I made a mistake. I opened it. I don't know why. Curiosity, exhaustion, fear. Maybe all 3. The hallway lights flickered as I stepped out. The red door stood still, quiet. I walked up to it. The brass knob looked polished, almost wet. I reached out. As soon as my fingers brushed the metal, I felt a jolt run through my body, like static shock but deep. And then, I saw something, not with my eyes, with my mind. Flashes. A woman curled in a corner, hands over her face. A man standing over her, holding a knife. Blood. Screams. Then silence. Then black. I woke up on the floor of my apartment. Door locked. Lights off. No memory of how I got there. But my hand still tingled. And there was a red smear on my palm. Like paint. Or blood. I tried to ask my neighbors about it. No one wanted to talk. One guy from 2A looked genuinely scared. You live across from 3B? He asked. I nodded. He swallowed. It's not just storage. I waited. They locked it up after the incident. Years ago, the guy who used to live there, he snapped. Killed his girlfriend. Left her in the tub. Then, just disappeared. They never found him? He shook his head. Place was empty for weeks before anyone noticed. When they went in, there was blood everywhere. No body. No note. Just a red door covered in handprints. I didn't ask anything else. I went back upstairs and stared at the red door. Later that night, it knocked again. I decided to record it. Set up a camera in the hallway, pointing straight at the red door. At 3:03 a.m., the knocks came. The whispering started. Then, the door handle turned. Slowly, the camera glitched. The screen went black for 3 seconds. When the feed returned, the door was closed. No one was there. I replayed the footage. Same thing. Except right before the blackout, I swear I saw something step into the hallway. Just a shadow. Tall. Thin. Facing the camera. And smiling. The final straw came 2 nights later. I woke to find my apartment freezing. My breath hung in the air. And the door to 3B was wide open. Not just open, inviting. Inside it was pitch black. Like light refused to enter. And something was moving in the dark. Shifting. Watching. I didn't go in. I shut my own door and called the police. When they arrived, the red door was shut. Locked. They searched it anyway. Inside was an empty room.
No furniture.
No blood. Just walls painted solid red. All of them. Even the ceiling. And in the middle of the floor was a single old-fashioned tape recorder. The officer pressed play. A voice crackled through. I'm still here. I never left. And I'm not alone. Click. They left. Told me to call if anything else happened. I moved out the next day. A few weeks later, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, there was no voice. Just knocking. 3 slow knocks. Then a whisper. You saw me. Now you're mine. Click. I changed my number. Moved states. But sometimes at night, I still hear knocking in my dreams. And every time I pass a door that's painted red, I hold my breath and keep walking. Because one day that door might open again. And this time, I might not be fast enough to shut it. I used to spend summers at my grandparents' farm when I was a kid. It was one of those long, flat properties in southern Indiana. Barns, chickens, dusty porches, and, of course, acres of corn that stretched forever. To a 10-year-old, it was paradise. Endless land to explore, a pond to skip rocks, a tractor I wasn't allowed to drive but did anyway. But there was one place I was never allowed to go. The eastern field. Grandpa called it the far edge, and he was dead serious about it. No matter what you hear, he told me one evening as we sat on the porch, you stay out of that corn, especially at night. Why? I asked. He just looked at me. Because something smiles back. At first, I thought it was a joke. Adults like to spook kids with stories like that. But my grandparents didn't joke much, especially not Grandpa. He was the kind of man who drank black coffee at 10 p.m. and still chopped wood for fun. I stayed out of that field for the first few summers. Not out of fear, just because there was always enough to do elsewhere. But in the summer I turned 12, everything changed. It started with the scarecrow. There had always been one out there. Typical stuff. Flannel shirt, straw hat, stitched smile. It stood guard like a forgotten statue in the middle of the corn. But one afternoon, I noticed something strange. It had moved. Not far, just a few feet closer to the edge of the field. Still in the corn. Still normal. But closer. I asked Grandpa about it. He didn't answer. Just stared at it, jaw tight. Then mumbled, "It's early this year." That night I couldn't sleep. The windows were open. A breeze rolled in, thick with the scent of stalks and dirt. Around 2 a.m. I heard it, rustling, from the eastern field. I sat up. At first I thought it was the wind. Then laughter. Low, ragged. Not a child's laugh. Not quite an adult's either. Something in between. I crept to the window and looked out toward the field. First nothing. Then I saw it. A shape, tall, thin, lurching between the stalks. The scarecrow. Only it was walking, slow and crooked, like it didn't remember how. And then it stopped, right at the edge of the field, and turned. I don't know how to explain what I saw. It wasn't made of straw anymore. His face was stretched, lips torn into a permanent smile. Black, glassy eyes too wide, too human. It saw me, and it smiled wider. I slammed the window shut and hid under my blanket. The next morning, the scarecrow was back on its post. Exactly where it had been before. But its shirt was different. It was wearing my grandpa's flannel. I tried to tell my grandparents. They didn't say a word. Just exchanged a look like they'd been waiting for this. Grandma finally said, "It's watching you now." "What is?" I asked. Grandpa answered, "The smiling thing. Picks one every few years. If it likes you, it shows you its face." I asked him what it wanted. He said, "Company." That night I heard it again. Not outside. Inside. A creak in the hallway. A soft dragging noise, like something being pulled. I peeked out of my room. Nothing. Until I looked down the staircase. At the front door. It was open. Wide open. And at the edge of the porch, halfway in the moonlight, was the scarecrow. Only it wasn't a scarecrow anymore. It was the thing wearing its skin. And it was smiling. I ran to my grandparents' room. They were gone. Bed empty. No note. No sound. I checked every room. No one. Until I reached the back door. It was open too. And in the dirt, footprints. Leading to the eastern field. I followed them. I don't know why. I walked into the corn, heart pounding, air thick with something that smelled like rot and burnt hay. The stalks closed in behind me. I was swallowed. And then silence. Not even bugs. Just a hum in my ears and my own breath. I walked for what felt like hours. Then I saw it. Clearing. Perfect circle. And in the middle, them. My grandparents. Standing motionless. Eyes wide. Mouths open. Smiling. And next to them, it. The smiling thing. Taller now. Towering. Wearing my grandpa's flannel like a trophy. Its smile stretched so far it split its cheeks. It looked at me, and it tilted its head. That's the last thing I remember. I woke up in my bed. Morning sun pouring through the window. Everything looked normal. The house, the porch, even the field. My grandparents were in the kitchen like nothing had happened. When I asked them about it, they smiled. Not wide, not split, just a little too long. Too forced. They said, "You're safe now." It chose someone else. But I know that wasn't true, because that night when I went to brush my teeth, I looked in the mirror, and my smile wouldn't stop. When someone you love dies, the pain doesn't stop at the funeral. It follows you home. It sits in your living room, sleeps in your bed, shows up in your dreams. At least, that's how I used to explain what happened, until I realized it wasn't just grief. It was something else, something real. My mother passed away in the fall of 2022. A stroke. Sudden. No warning. I got the call on a rainy Tuesday morning and was on a plane by that night. She lived in a small coastal town in Maine. in a creaky Victorian house that always felt like it belonged in a ghost story. I grew up there, left when I was 18, and never really looked back. Now I had to bury her in the same town I tried to forget. The funeral was small. Overcast skies. Sea mist in the air. A few distant relatives, some neighbors, and me. Afterwards, I stayed at her house to handle her affairs. The place hadn't changed in decades. Same wallpaper, same dusty furniture, same ticking grandfather clock that no one had wound in years. That night I couldn't sleep. The house creaked in ways I didn't remember. The wind outside felt like it was whispering through the cracks. Around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps. Not heavy, just soft, careful steps on the old wood floors. I figured I was hearing things. Jet lag, stress. But the next night it happened again. And again the night after that. Always between 2 and 3 a.m. The day before I was supposed to leave, I found something strange in my mother's closet. Tucked behind coats and old photo albums was a shoebox. Inside was a single item. A doll. Not a plastic one. Hand-stitched. Its face was made of burlap, with black buttons for eyes and a mouth sewn shut with red thread. A note was pinned to its chest. Written in my mother's shaky handwriting. Do not bury me with this. I felt sick just looking at it. I threw the box into the dumpster behind the house. That night I heard footsteps again. But this time, they stopped outside my door. I held my breath, waited. Then slowly, the doorknob turned. No one was there. Just the hallway, dimly lit by a night light at the end. But I felt it, like something had been on the other side. Watching, waiting. I left the next morning. I didn't stay for the estate sale. Didn't even pack everything. I just left. But the thing is, I don't think it stayed behind. It started with the doll. It showed up on my kitchen table a week later. Same buttons. Same red thread. Same box. No note this time. I burned it in the sink. Watched it turn to ash. But that night, I heard the footsteps again. In my apartment. And worse, I saw her. My mother. Standing in the corner of my bedroom. Motionless. Eyes blank. Mouth sewn shut. I started to lose it. Friends said I was grieving. That I needed help. So I saw a therapist. She listened. Took notes. Told me what I was experiencing was complicated bereavement. Until I showed her the photos. Pictures I took of the doll before I burned it. Her face went pale. This isn't grief, she whispered. She recommended I talk to someone else. A man named Dr. Kamal, paranormal researcher. Used to be a psychologist. Now specialized in cursed objects. Yeah. I laughed too. But then the doll came back. In my bed. Right next to me. Staring up with those button eyes. So I called him. Dr. Kamal came to my apartment 3 days later. Didn't say much at first. He walked every room. Lit some incense. Took temperature readings. Then sat me down and said this. You didn't bring your grief home. You brought her guardian. Her what? He pointed at the photo of the doll. These were used in some old traditions. Not voodoo, not witchcraft. Something older. The threads in the mouth. That's to contain it. The buttons? To blind it. She must have known something was trying to get through. This wasn't a doll. It was a lock. And I threw it away. I whispered. He nodded. You opened the door. He told me to move. Immediately. Burn everything I brought from the house. Clothes, books, pictures. I did. But the thing kept coming. Now it doesn't wait until 2 a.m. Now it shows up in mirrors. In dreams. Sometimes it looks like my mother. Sometimes it doesn't. Last night it sat at the foot of my bed. Couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. It leaned close and whispered, You let me in. I don't know how much longer I can stay sane. I haven't slept in 3 days. Dr. Kamal says there may be one last way to bind it again. A ritual. but it needs something from the original source. And I already burned everything. Almost everything. There's one thing left. Me. Because I saw it. I touched it. And now it's part of me. So tonight, I sew my mouth shut and pray to whatever's listening that it stays locked inside. Because if it ever gets out again, it won't just be me it follows.